Hi everyone, this tutorial is to show you how to piece my latest pattern, which is the Teacup Pocket Block. It's a pretty simple block in that it's a teacup block, not too complicated. However, it has this little added feature, which is a pocket. Plus the pattern comes with an additional bonus, which is instructions on how to make this adorable little needle keeper with, of course, a spot for a fussy cut tag. This design is perfect for a stitching project bag or a sewing kit. The pattern includes two teacup designs, the mod teacup that is slightly simpler with its cleaner lines, and the fancy teacup, which has a rounded base and slightly more detail in the handle. Now, an important thing to note about this tutorial, this is not an FPPE tutorial. This tutorial is really focused on how to piece the pocket aspect of this block, not on the basic technique of foundation paper piecing. If you are not familiar with paper piecing or you need a little refresher, if you're a newbie or just a beginner level and you just want to brush up your skills, I have an entire playlist that shows the technique, how to cut your fabric, how to choose fabric, what tools to use, how to fussy cut, a bunch of different tips and techniques. So look for the foundation paper piecing playlist in my YouTube channel and you'll find all of that. Make yourself a real cup of tea and sit and watch for a bit. And then when you're done, you can make yourself a fabric cup of tea afterwards. One last thing before we get started. The diagrams in the instructions for this pattern are for the mod teacup. And so for that reason, I'm going to piece a fancy teacup. That way you'll have a visual for both options. Right, let's get started. So here's my setup for this block. I have my pre-cut foundation paper piecing template. I have the super cute tulip pink bunny that I'm going to fussy cut for the front of the teacup. And then I'm using this red for the lining inside the teacup as well as the saucer and the handle. And then for the background, I'm using this beautiful pink floral, and the pale bluish pink color picks up on the highlight in the bunny. So I think it'll go really well together. And my tea tag is this yellow fabric with a little heart that picks up on the color in the bunny's ear. So the first step is to cut out the fabric for the front of the teacup pocket using the fussy cutting guide. If you're making a teacup without a pocket, so just a regular FPP block, use this dashed line for the top of your rectangle, not the top line. But if you're adding a pocket, you need the full-size rectangle. The top half of this rectangle will be folded back on itself to create the inside lining of the teacup. Next, we prepare the teacup pocket. So we're going to take the teacup front, which is the tall rectangle, and fold that in half lengthwise, wrong sides together, with the fussy cut design on top, and we give that a press. Then we lay our lining fabric right side up and place the teacup front on top. We're going to line up the left, the bottom and the right sides, and you'll see there's about a 1/2 inch space of lining that stands proud at the top. Next up, stitch an X of basting stitch through all the layers so they can be held together as we work with them to create the pocket. This will be referred to as the teacup pocket sandwich, and you can put it aside for now. So next up, we're going to prep the back of the printed template, so on the unprinted side, which is a little bit of a weird step for FPP, but bear with me. This is going to come in super handy when it comes to positioning the teacup pocket sandwich so that we can get a perfect fussy cut and pocket placement. So using a sharp pencil, like a push pencil and a ruler, trace the two sides of the teacup as well as the top and bottom of the teacup, not the saucer but the teacup. You want to trace those lines, but you want them to go edge to edge because the fabric will extend this area. So we want to be able to see those lines outside of the teacup area. And then once that's done, we're also going to trace the center point. So you can see the center point is on the template, but you want it marked on the back and about 1 inch high so that you can see the line over and above the fabric that we're about to place there. But before we can position the pocket, we need to piece the handle. So the next step is to go ahead and piece sections 1 to 7 on the template with just regular paper piecing. When you're done piecing the handle, trim around all sides, bottom and top, with an add a quarter ruler to prepare the 1/4 inch seam allowances for the upcoming seams. Great, let's bring the finger pocket sandwich back on the seam and fold it right sides together widthways and finger press the halfway mark at the top in the lining area. Then lay the paper template fabric side up and position the finger pocket sandwich on top, aligning the center points, and then align the top folded edge of the teacup front, so that would be the top of my bunny ears, with the horizontal line that represents the top of the teacup. And once you've aligned that, just drop it down about 1 millimeter. You want it just below that line. And the reason for that is to prevent it from getting caught in the seam that will be stitched along that line. So you want it just below there. Okay, so once everything's in the right spot, use a pin, preferably a flat head pin, so that it prevents the template from buckling, and pin it vertically so that the pin is not in the way of the side seam of the teacup. To do a quick check, fold the lining over the teacup rim and make sure that you have just a little bit of space there that will prevent the teacup from getting caught in the seam. Now, if you're a regular paper piecer, you're probably wondering what the heck we're doing here, because the fabric is not right sides together, and so it doesn't make any sense. It's a bit of a weird step, but bear with me. What we're doing is preparing the position for the fussy cut and the pocket. So we want to make sure that they are perfect, and this little next step is going to be how we do that. So stay tuned. Alright, so we need to flip the paper template over so that it's printed side up. And our next step is to prepare that seam allowance between the pieced handle and section 8, which is the teacup pocket. Now, if you're a left-handed person, this is the perfect position for you. You're going to be cutting on the left. However, if you're right-handed like I am, you need to rotate this template around so that it's upside down. So printed side up, but rotated around so that the writing is upside down. Then once you have the cutting area on the right, you fold the template on the upcoming seam between 7 and 8. You place the add a quarter ruler with the little 1/4 inch ridged section on that fold, and you're just going to trim through all 3 layers of that teacup pocket section as if it was just a single piece of fabric. So you're just going ahead and trimming the whole shebang. Great. Next, we're going to mark the angles of this upcoming piece. And this is what's going to make it so easy for you to position that little fussy cut in place. So we want to mark the angles in the seam allowance area of the top piece. So that's the pieced handle area that you've got there. And we're going to make a mark on the piece underneath, which is the lining of the teacup pocket, so that we know exactly where to position this fabric when we remove the pin and turn it right sides together. So just use a ruler to follow the line of the angle and just make that marking on the piece underneath. So here you can see a close-up to see what I'm talking about. It's a simple yet brilliant little trick to achieve accuracy, as you'll see in a bit. And now that everything's lined up, we can go ahead and remove that pin and place the fabrics right sides together. So now we're back to regular programming here with fabrics right sides together. So the first thing you do is align the cut edges as you do normally. But the trick is to have a look at those little markings and see where they are and position them on top of the edge of the piece below so that they're in the correct spot. And then we're going to pin the whole bundle together again with the flat pin, and then we get to stitch it, which is the exciting part. Quick double check on our little angle markings, making sure they're in the right spots, and then we turn the template back over to printed side up. And you can see our seam allowance here is prepped for the seam, so let's go ahead and stitch that seam between 7 and 8. Okie dokes, this is the first moment of truth. We're going to remove the pin and open up our fabric and give it a good finger press on the right hand side, and then see where that top rim of the teacup is lying. Hopefully it's lying parallel to that straight horizontal line, but just below it. That's the ideal scenario. Give it a press. Great. So that's looking pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. I mean, you can pull it down a tiny bit if you're a smidge out, if you have a little bit of fudge room. Let's do a quick check by folding the lining over the rim again, so that we can check we have that little 1 millimeter there, and that looks good. So again, now we're going to pin, and making sure the pin goes in the middle, not interfering with the left hand side of the cup, because we're going to be trimming down that edge. So on this pattern we need to trim 2 sections, between sections 9 and between section 10. So I'm doing 10 first here because it's the bigger one, and then I'll trim the seam allowance for 9 afterwards, which is that little corner at the bottom. For the mod cup you don't have to do this because you have only one line, you don't have that little curved bottom. And you can actually trim the little corner for section 11 while you're here too. I forgot to shoot that in the video, but it's the same as on 9. You're just going to have that angle on the other side. Great, now we're back to doing a bit of piecing. We're going to piece the other side of the cup, and for the fancy cup that includes 11. So both sides for the fancy cup, and then the saucer and the bottom bit. So for the fancy cup you're piecing sections 9 to 15, and for the mod cup you're piecing sections 9 to 13, and you'll end up with your saucer completed and the piece of background fabric below it, and then we're going to tackle the top. So when you piece these sides and bottom area of the teacup, you can go ahead and trim the seam allowances as you go on the sides and on the bottom, but don't trim the seam allowance at the top. We have that 1/2 inch at the top there, which is a little bit extra, and we're going to be needing that in the next step, so don't touch that. So look at our beautiful teacup. She's coming along really nicely now. So as you can see, I've pieced the cup and the saucer, and I've trimmed the side seam allowances. I have a little bit extra hanging at the bottom, but that's okay. And I have not trimmed the extra at the top, and we're going to need that in the next step. So now we can remove the pin, and we can also undo the basting stitches that we put in to hold everything together. And when you remove these basting stitches, because they are larger, easier to remove stitches, you don't need a lot of force, and so you don't want to put a lot of strain on the fabric. So I usually use the seam ripper almost sideways. I sort of lay it kind of flat against the fabric, and then just use the back end of it just to sort of loosely pull the stitches out. They come out pretty easily, and you don't need to worry about the threads that are underneath. They can stay there for now. We'll get them later. Woohoo! It's time to tackle the top. Let's do it. So now this little bit of extra fabric up here is going to come in handy. We're going to nudge the teacup rim out of the way of that seam that we're about to sew above, but we don't want to pull the lining as well. So we're going to pin the lining to the template so that it doesn't pull down while we're nudging the teacup rim out of the way. Then gently just coax that teacup rim downwards, make a little tuck or a fold, and pin it in place. So you're mostly aiming for the corners of the teacup, because if you can angle the corners out of the way, then the center part automatically is out of the way. Pin the 2 pins at an angle going in towards the top corners. And once you've pinned those in place, you can then just use a ruler to check where the seam line is and make sure that you're safe on both corners, and of course in the middle too. And if everything looks good, you can remove the top pin holding the lining down, then turn the template over to printed side up and trim the seam allowance in preparation for the piece of background fabric coming above. Don't remove the pins until we've stitched the seam. Then lay the piece of background fabric right sides down on top and go ahead and stitch that seam. And this seam is worth paying attention to make sure you stay on the line so that you don't catch the rim in the stitches. Awesome. Let's see how we did. Well, that looks pretty good. I'm happy with that. You can see here in the left corner we're good, in the right corner we're good, and in the middle we're good. So I can remove the pins and give it a press. Now, if yours does get caught in one of the corners or in a small section, don't unpick the whole seam. Just unpick the little bit where it got caught, re-pin it out of the way, and then just re-stitch that small section. That'll save you a lot of work. Look at how cute this little pocket is. I'm pretty excited about that. Okay, I can now trim the seam allowances for the last two side sections of the background. So I'm going to go ahead and do that and then stitch them up and trim the block down. And just like that, we are done. Isn't she cute? I love bunnies, and I love this little bunny. And a perfect little pocket that just needs a tea bag. So let's make one. This is our cutie tea bag needle keeper. The tea bag itself is made up of felt, and then it has a cute little tag that tells you the flavor of your tea or just adds to the story of your block, and that's just attached with a piece of butcher's twine. You can probably fit about 6 or 8 needles on here at a push. It's not an extensive needle book, obviously. This was designed with a project bag in mind. So you'd have your project inside the bag, your little teacup on the outside with a pocket. And if you just needed to change needles, you could just whip out your tea bag and there you'd have them. So let's make one. Here are the ingredients, shall we say, for making a tea bag needle keeper. A piece of felt, lightweight interfacing, a piece of fabric with a cute image for fussy cutting, and you can use the fussy cutting template for cutting it out for placement of that image. A teeny scrap of lightweight fusible fleece. If you don't have a scrap of this, you can use interfacing. And then a piece of butcher's twine or whatever string you have handy. All the measurements for these are in the pattern. To start, we're going to center the interfacing onto one side of the felt and fuse that. And while we're there, we may as well do the tag too. So we're going to center the piece of fusible fleece onto the back of the tag fabric. Now for both of these, it's important to note that both felt and the fleece can melt under the iron. So use a press cloth when ironing. Great. Next we fold the fleece in half lengthways, wrong sides together, so interfacing sides together, and give it a press. Great, that's beautiful and flat. Now we take the tea bag template and place it on top, and then just use that as a guide to cut the 2 top corners of the tea bag off, just to give it that tea bag shape. Next up, we take our butcher's twine, fold it in half, and then tie a little knot near the end. So the way to get it near the end is to tie a loose knot and then just nudge it down towards the cut ends with your thumb, and then when it gets close you just tighten it. Next up, we're going to slip the folded edge of the butcher's twine loop in between the layers of the tea bag at the top end. Now you can just slide it in there and hold it and you'll be fine, but a dab of glue stick enables you to get a nice sharp tip, position it exactly, you give it a quick finger press and it'll hold it perfectly in place for when you're stitching, and the presser foot won't push the twine off center. Now we're going to top stitch all the way around the edge of the tea bag, 1/8 of an inch from the edge. Start at the top end where the twine is, then go all the way around and then back stitch back over where you started. Awesome, we're almost there. There we have our tea bag, and now we're going to make the tag. Lay the tea tag fabric wrong side up and then fold the 3/8 inch seam allowance area at both the top and the bottom end, wrong sides together, and give that a quick press. Next, we fold this fabric right sides together, and we're going to stitch a 1/4 inch seam on both sides, back stitching at start and finish. Here we have it. Great! Next up, we're going to turn this right sides out, and the easiest way to do that is to use a straw and a chopstick. Slide the straw into the opening end, and then poke the other end with the tip of the chopstick into the opening of the straw, and it'll push it right through for you, as you can see. Then just use the chopstick to negotiate some nice sharp corners, and then give it a press. And now we have the same process to insert the end of the string into the tag. So I'm going to apply a little bit of glue stick onto the end of the knot, again just to hold it in place. This is not imperative. And then you just nudge it in to the center, and you want the knot to go about 3/8 of an inch into the tag. And the reason for that is so that the little lump of the knot doesn't push your presser foot out of the way and make your stitching skew. In fact, that's also why I chose fusible fleece instead of interfacing for the tag, because the fleece gives a little bit of padding that hides the knot a little bit. Great, we're at the finish line. So for the last step, you top stitch close to the edge all the way around the tag. Awesome, we're done. Now tuck your tea bag into your teacup and brew yourself something crafty. Thanks for watching, everyone. Happy stitching, and let me know your thoughts about this tutorial in the comments.